Hello there, my lovely souls. How are you tonight? It's a Wednesday night. I'm here for my weekly aha moments. It's a little, gosh, running a little late tonight. But I just wanted to talk to you. Well, there's a lot. I'm talking about a lot of stuff coming up so quickly. Oh, there's my phone. I forgot to mute it. My apologies. But it's over there. So many, so much material, like being moved through my consciousness at this time. It's hard for me to keep up. And it's also um, related on so many levels that sometimes it's hard for me to connect it all until I've sat with it and processed it. But um, the title that I was moved to put in the description of this this live tonight was anti-love. And I just happen to be wearing this a shirt, oddly enough. Um, so anti-love. And it came this idea came from a download I received regarding um, the misuse and the abuse and um, the misidentification of love and what that is. Hello. So, uh, how it showed up was that when people are open-hearted, or they're loving, or they're vulnerable, um, sometimes people will try to manipulate that to uh, get their own needs met. Manipulate or use that sort of um, loving spirit uh, because they can't receive it. And they're still operating from a limited perspective, like from the 3D perspective of lack. And so um, they tend to try to um, look at everything as what's in it for me, not realizing or not being aware that everyone on some level is a reflection of you. And so if you're trying to manipulate or control, it's because you have the belief, you're operating from the belief that, first of all, you don't deserve to have love, so you have to steal it or you have to take it through manipulation or control. And so just really being present to a lot of pain people have around opening their hearts about being authentic. And this has been coming up for me as being seen. And, it's really interesting because, gosh, I don't remember what year I started this Facebook page. I think it was 2016. But I want to say probably 2020 is when I started, actually showing up on a somewhat regular basis because I had left my teaching job, my full-time teaching job that I had, been in education for about 17 years, and I left and began just working on developing my coaching business as a transformational life coach and a meditation teacher, teaching yogic philosophy and transformational practices and principles to support people to have and live a life that they were in love with, in love. But you can't have a life that you love if you don't know that you are love and that you have a loving relationship with yourself. And you can see this on different levels. You can see it on a feeling level, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our place in the world. And that's connected very finely to our, or intimately to our thoughts that we have about ourselves. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, that many of us are unconscious of the level of self-rejection through judgment, guilt, shame, humiliation, blame, um, that a lot of us tend to project out on the world, not realizing that we're only projecting what's inside of us. And so, of course, it's going to show up out in the world. So if you have a wounded consciousness, then that's what you're going to see outside of you. Um, but because part of the wound is not realizing your true nature, which is unconditional love. And the ego mind or the personality is the conditioned mind, not the unconditional mind. And that's why having a systematic approach, for example, a system to help support you in realizing when you're stuck in your conditional mind, when you're operating out of the conditional mind, because the conditional mind was created out of lack, out of I'm not that, there's not enough, I need this, desire, reaction, um, mostly reactive. And so it's important to be able to notice when you're operating out of that, because that does not reflect your holistic nature. It only reflects that survival part of your brain. Um, but as one of my mentors said, it takes both matter and spirit to be a human being. Being. We're not one or the other, we're both. We're the marriage of both. Except we, as Western society, have predominantly been trained to focus on our identity as a mental concept, as the conversation in our head, which is based on conditions. And so, what system do you have in place to help you notice when you're operating from reaction, reactionary ego, um, that has a story that the power's outside of me? Um, I like this victim mentality that we've all been like, the personality is a product of that. So it isn't an opportunity or a time to blame or shame or guilt ourselves more than we already have. It's an opportunity to put some supports and some tools and some practices in place so that as soon as we notice, we can shift out of it into love. And love by definition is unconditional. But what we have parading around today as love, and that's why I called it anti-love, is please let me manipulate and control you and live into my ego stories of I have to dominate, I have to control, and I have to manipulate to get what I want and to make me feel loved, which is really the ego saying, feed my addiction to not being enough, which is not love at all. And so once we begin to make these distinctions, then the whole way that we've been showing up in the world, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, everything I share with you, I've become an expert about because of my own healing journey that I've gone through, um, that I've committed to for myself. And then now have an opportunity to share it with others. And somebody I was coaching asked me, well, how are you so sure, Adrienne? And I'm like, well, it's not that I'm sure, like in a personality way. It's not like I'm sure as in I know way. It's that I've seen and I've observed how the ego operates. And I've seen through my own experience the limitations of that and the pain and the suffering that it's caused. And what happens when you continue to stay in that place, as an adult, you're not able to take responsibility or to be responsible for your life and your experience. And this has come up, you know, I am I am an intuitive, and I it's very rare that I say that out loud. And this is related to being seen for who I am, uh, which was part of the way I was conditioned into my home, was not to say what I thought, what I saw, what I felt, what I experienced, because it was too upsetting. It was presented as not loving on an unconscious level. Like, oh, so much of this is unconscious that we're not even aware of. At most things are, until they become conscious. And, I've been doing this work for 30 years. So it's not like I just showed up on the scene, you know, 5 years ago. It's just that I was called to be in service, for people like myself who may be creatives or empaths or sensitives or intuitives, or are individuals that are in the process of waking up to the truth of the full spectrum of their humanity, outside and in addition to the ego or the personality, but not restricted to it. And, I could talk forever about this, this delicate process of, once we realize this is an opportunity to reject our personality or reject our ego. Excuse me. It's an opportunity to just surrender it to a higher expression of who we want to be and what we see as possible. Well, we're already it. We are already complete. It's just getting to the realization that I can accept that. I can do it with love for myself. I can accept all that I am, instead of believing I'm just this little self that is helpless, powerless, a victim or a perpetrator or some combination of those. Um, and so I have always been very gifted in seeing through BS of the personality. But I kind of, when I was younger, I just had to shut it down because it was not appreciated. It wasn't validated. In fact, it was the opposite, right? Um, I wasn't recognized or acknowledged for this gift of being able to see the truth of people. Because when people don't know who they are, there's a disconnect between who they are on the inside and then who they are on the outside. There's a disconnect between their mind and their heart. They're constantly bouncing back and forth between the two, having an inner struggle and conflict in their own mind. And this is super painful. And so, um, someone else said to me, I put a couple posts up this week that had to do with God and they had to do with religion, actually conviction. And I don't like to mix God and religion because I don't think they're the same. And so a couple people had left comments. Somebody said, well, the name, I think it was Sonia, she said, the name God really triggers me. And I know for it did, I was raised in the church. So in my 20s, I didn't even want to, I didn't really want to even talk about God because the God that I'd been given wasn't a God of love. It was a God of lots of other things, conditional. There was hypocrisy that did not resonate with me as being a loving spirit, so I didn't want to be around that. So now I just call this infinite field of all that is the supreme being. Sometimes I call it quantum field, um, infinite intelligence. One of my mentors calls it the big sweetie, because when you realize that you are not separate from love, your life itself, consciousness, loves you so, like, that's just its essence is love. Your essence is love. And people can say, well, how can you say that? I can say that because the law, which is another word for God, or the infinite, or the supreme being, will give you in your material conditions whatever you're holding in your consciousness. No questions asked, even if it's causing you suffering or other people's suffering. Because if it's not free will, if it's not by choice that you come to this knowing, then it's not yours. It has to be chosen, it has to be embodied, it has to be your experience. Nobody can experience it for you, nobody can do the work, and that's what's so difficult about church is because you have these people interpreting things for you that you have to figure out on your own. You can't have really anyone. It's like going to the gym. You can't send somebody to do the weightlifting for you. You actually have to do it yourself. If you'd like the results, right? The effect of doing the workouts. But somebody said, why are you so, oh, I didn't know you were so religious. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Maybe they just met me, right? Maybe they haven't heard a lot of what I share. I call on the symbology of every wisdom tradition, the core of it, that contains truth, whether that's Christianity, whether that's Buddhism, whether that's the Vedic texts, whether that's storytelling and myths that are the language of the soul. And so um, it's also, for me, it's like that um, metaphor of the Trinity is in every tradition. I chose to speak about God yesterday because America was found on, well, church, the separation between church and state. Although in um, the philosophical foundation was based on a biblical truth that all people were created equal and had the right to happiness and living a fulfilling life. Um, and so, it's ironic that our money says in God we trust as our supply. But anyhow, so I pull on whatever wisdom traditions are speaking to me in the moment. Um, and I just feel like in the last couple days, um, that was what was coming up for me. So that's what I was sharing in regard to the law of the principle of the mind. Whatever we choose to believe is our conviction, and our life will reflect it because our life is love, and so are we. And it's constantly giving to us generously, moment to moment, through the entirety of our life. And it's hard sometimes to fathom that that's really the case because we have been so conditioned away from our own power, like literally, that is inside of us. Um, and it is so interesting because the last 2 nights I have experienced some paranormal activity, um, trying to go to sleep and um, not being able to go to sleep until like 1 in the morning. And then, not last night, but not last night, 2 nights ago, let's just say, the fire alarm went off in the hallway outside my bedroom door, and there was no fire. And then it went off, and I was like, phew. It was like 2:40 in the morning. It woke me up, and then it went off again. So I went to go get the step ladder to go pull it down, and then it just went off. And then the following night, I had laid down. I was tossing and turning, couldn't really get to sleep. It's probably after 12 o'clock. All of a sudden, all the lights in my room went on. I was just like, what the heck? Did you just see that? And I just laid in my bed for a little bit, and just kind of like, hmm. And so we're talking about the power, right? Our power, um, being able to consciously use it. And so having those paranormal activities, um, on some level, like metaphorically, if we're looking at this from a symbolic universe, um, it was an alarm about power, um, or somebody's trying to get my attention. So I haven't had time to really sit down and look at it intuitively just because I've been busy for the past couple of days. But I'm going to take a look at that and I'll let you know what I find out. Um, it's just, there's been an intensity of energy the past couple of days. Well, let's just say since 2020. Everything has been amped up. Um, it's just different, right? Each year since then has had a different tone, a different flavor. But before I go, I just want to finish up about being seen. So part of my agreement growing up was um, not to show that part of me, which was the intuitive, which was the seer, which was an energetic sensitive. And I had to shut that all off. And now that I've done tons of work, cleared out tons of distortion in my space through my personality, doing my healing work, my inner child and my ego and my higher self, and creating, a family, a co-creative inner family, healing all those parts of me that were fragmented and so not available. And they get pushed down into the subconscious mind, and um, they get triggered. We only notice them when they get triggered, and they rise to the top. The pain that pushed it down rises to the top for a little bit, and then it sinks back down until we're triggered again. And then another part of our fragmentation shows up when it's to feel that pain, and then it's pushed back down again. And so we're not truly present because we're living inside of the ego personality, which is trying to remain unaware of all the pain that caused it to fragment into different um, parts of our inner world. And because our attention is always being pulled out, what do they say? That the average attention span now is like 8 seconds. Like people can only watch a video for 8 seconds. Like it's been 26 minutes here, so you probably aren't even here listening to this unless you accidentally clicked on it the last 8 minutes, seconds. Sorry. um, so we're really impatient, and we're like, what? Well, just tell us now, and we don't have time for a lot of things, and we're just jumping around from distraction to distraction. And so that makes it perhaps even more challenging now to go and to sit and to be with um, all of that material. So, um, I know I covered a lot of ground because I had a lot coming up, but just to give you a quick summary, I was talking to you about having a system, having tools, having practices to realize when you're acting or motivated from the ego personality, which is one of being triggered. And it might not be an outside trigger, right? It could be, I'm not good in what you're telling yourself, right? I'm not good enough. Um, you know, I'm not very exciting. Well, all the things that we tell ourselves, like, who would want to talk to me? Um, I hope they don't find out what a loser I, you know what I mean? It's all this self-judgment and criticism. And so are we acting out of that conditioned ego personality conversation? And when we notice, how do we start clearing that so we can choose consciously to move and have our being from unconditional love, which is our natural state and our birthright. So that was one point I wanted to circle back on. The second one was being seen. And I gave my example of my hesitancy in my life to be seen in my intuitive gifts because some people were, well, the ego is threatened by it. Let's just be honest. Because it's hiding a lot of stuff. It's doing a lot of work over time to protect itself. And so, of course, the ego is going to be nervous when it knows or it suspects that you're reading your energy, or we can see who you really are, which is unconditional love. And the whole ego system starts going into a panic, and will get triggered most often and will have to remove itself from your presence. And so a lot of that was trying to make other people feel comfortable about who they're being. And when I say who they're being, I mean their conditional personality that is a product of their demons. And when I say demon, I mean that sub-personality pretending to be you that is addicted to not enough, manipulation, control, being a victim, all the things that aren't truly you, but we have been conditioned to identify with that voice in our head that is conditional. And we're not, that is not our nature. We are a product of unconditional love. And our ego personality just hasn't caught up with it. So when you're in the presence of someone that can smell, not even smell, notice that you are not operating from the truth or the fullness of who you are, and it's actually going to say something to you, hold you accountable, and remind you of what's available when your ego personality quits being afraid and being in a panic. And then with compassion, be able to look at, like, why would that personality story get put in place? What was I believing about life? What was I believing about myself that was so hurtful and so clearly not true, but I believed it? And then it became my suffering because the pain is caused by identifying with something that is a half-truth. And that's the division, that's the lie, to be divided with oneself when there is only one consciousness called you. And if you're not able or willing to bring all those parts of yourself back home to accept and to love them, even in their pain, even in their limitation, even of the story of how the ego operates, and then before you know it, like anything, like going to the gym, you start doing a little bit every day, every week, and you start building your muscle. And so a lot of us were unable to build the muscle of our inner capacity to observe our own consciousness, to be able to hold our emotions without having to distract ourselves or go into disassociation or addiction. Um, we just weren't taught. And so you can, spend years developing that inner capacity, um, or you can accelerate it, right? You can accelerate it by working with skilled, knowledgeable coaches, teachers that have walked the path and can help support you in being accountable to the truth of who you are. Because let's face it, left to our own devices, most often we'll go back to what is comfortable and what we know. And so sometimes, right, it's worth, not sometimes, it's your life, right? You are worth having the fullness of who you are every moment of your life, right? You are worth being able to choose a life that is, I was just talking, this is getting super long, so sometimes when I'm talking, I'm like, oh, that reminded me of this. We're talking about this duality, this world of duality, that, if I'm sick, I'm unhealed, then I need to be healed. And both of these are two ends of the same spectrum. And we're talking about Tina Turner. And Tina Turner is like such an incredible example of being able to no longer be stuck in these two oppositional um, choices that were, they're not truly choices, right? They're reactions. So if I'm unhealed, I need to be healed. There's still something missing, right? I need to be healed because I'm not okay. So I have to reject the unhealed part of me so I can get to the healed part of me. The truth is you're already healed, whole, and complete. That's what the word heal means. It means whole. And so what's happening is uh, this 3D material world of conditions, which is conditional, which I was talking to you about earlier, that one of the teachings of Buddhism is the distinctions about causes and conditions, and that as as the soul returns to its true identity, then it no longer has to get stuck in the 3D condition. So you can go straight to source. And so um, it looks like a miracle. Like, how did she do that? How did she rise from the ashes? Because she was able to have support and a community and a sangha that could support her in learning the principles of the soul, which is that our origin is not this 3D world. We come here in a body, but we are both body and flesh. And the 3D world is not the origin of the spirit world. That's a different domain altogether. And once you're exposed and understand these laws, then you can access them and use them. And so, what looks like a miracle from the outside is actually just a realization of the law. And so, people might say, well, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust that. No, I no, I think what I'm saying is, people ask me like, well, how can you trust, like that person I was coaching the other day said, like, how do you know? How can you trust? Because I know the principle and I know how it works. And it's not the individual personality that I'm trusting, it's their connection to the principles and the laws, that those work every single time. No matter what, they're working. They cannot not work. It's our choice if we want to plug into them and use them consciously on purpose. And that's the work that I'm doing, is helping people to consciously access these tools and these laws and these principles they're always here. It's just that most of us are trying to access them through our ego personality, which is conditional, and they don't work in that realm, because love is a magnetic vibration, and it, by definition, is unconditional. There's no conditions on it, and the ego mind doesn't understand that. So um, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you um, came by either on the live, you popped in on the live, or you're listening to this on the replay, let me know if something I shared with you resonated with you, or you got something of value from something you heard tonight. And if you'd like to find out more about the work that I do, the coaching, the mentoring, you can check out my website at www.mindheart-space.com. It's listed on all my social media handles, so you shouldn't have difficulty. You can also message me um, through any of my social media platforms. And I just wanted to let you know, if you did not know, that every Sunday night at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, um, I have my INvoke Mastermind, where spiritually like-minded folks get together to receive coaching, support, gain clarity on their vision, how they're showing up, receive coaching. If that's something you want to find out more about, you can join us every Sunday night. You can find out more about it on my website, or you can reach out to me and I can let you know how you can register. All right. Great seeing you. It's such a pleasure. I'm so glad that you took the time to stop by and say hello. Until next time, please remember what a valuable treasure you are. And mwah, sending you lots of love, and bye for now.